Have you ever felt like you were born into the wrong destiny, that you deserved more than what life offered you? One man in the Bible felt this so deeply, he spent the first half of his life as a deceiver, a trickster who stole his brother's future with a bowl of soup and a clever lie. He ran from his past, built a new life, and was deceived in turn. But his journey of running was destined to end. Not in front of a human enemy, but on a dark riverbank, in a mysterious, all-night battle with an angel that would break his body, but forge his soul into the father of a nation. The story of his rivalry with Esau and the drama with his wives Leah and Rachel is a legendary family saga. But all of it was just a prelude to a single, terrifying night of reckoning. A night where Jacob wrestled a mysterious stranger until daybreak, received a permanent injury, and was given a new name that would echo through eternity. But the true identity of this divine opponent and the blessing Jacob demanded from him is a secret. Far more shocking than you realize. This is just the beginning of a saga filled with conflict, divine encounters, and profound transformation. If you're ready to dive deep into epic biblical stories like this, make sure you subscribe to the channel and activate the notifications, because you won't want to miss what happens next. Our story begins a generation after the great patriarch, Abraham, with his son Isaac. Isaac had married his beloved Rebekah, but for 20 years, they remained childless. After Isaac pleaded with the Lord, Rebekah conceived, but the pregnancy was violent. The children struggled so fiercely within her womb that she cried out in distress, "If this is so, why is this happening to me?" She went to inquire of the Lord and received a prophecy that would define the rest of her life and the history of her descendants. 2 nations are in your womb, and 2 peoples from within you will be separated. One people will be stronger than the other, and the older will serve the younger. The prophecy was fulfilled at their birth. The first to emerge was red and covered in hair, like a hairy garment. They named him Esau. Then his brother came out, with his hand grasping Esau's heel. He was named Jacob, a name that means he grasps the heel, a Hebrew idiom for a deceiver. The 2 boys grew into men as different as day and night. Esau was a skillful hunter, a man of the open country, rugged and impulsive. His father Isaac loved him for the wild game he brought home. Jacob was a quiet man, dwelling in tents, contemplative and clever, and he was his mother's favorite. The battle that began in the womb was now a silent war across the family tent. Jacob's name was not just a label, it was his nature. He was a master of opportunity, a man who saw angles others did not. His first major act of deception was a cold, calculated exploitation of his brother's weakness. One day, Esau came in from the open country, famished, saw Jacob cooking a stew of red lentils and said, "Quick, let me have some of that red stew. I'm about to die." Jacob, seeing his chance, replied with chilling calm, "First, sell me your birthright." The birthright was a sacred privilege. It entitled the firstborn son to a double portion of the inheritance and the spiritual leadership of the family. The patriarchal blessing passed down from Abraham to Esau in his moment of ravenous hunger. The future was an abstract concept. "Look, I am about to die," he said. "What good is the birthright to me?" And so, for a bowl of bread and lentil stew, Esau despised his birthright and sold it. But the stew was only the appetizer. The main course of deception came years later. When Isaac was old, his eyes so weak that he could not see, he called for Esau to hunt game and prepare a final meal, so he could give him his patriarchal blessing before he died. Rebekah overheard. In a flurry of calculated action, she orchestrated a high-stakes charade. She dressed Jacob in Esau's finest clothes, covered his smooth hands and neck with the skins of young goats, and sent him into his father's tent with a savory dish. The tension was palpable as the blind old man reached out to touch his son. "The voice is the voice of Jacob," Isaac murmured, "but the hands are the hands of Esau." Deceived by the smell and the feel of his son, Isaac bestowed the irrevocable blessing of Abraham upon Jacob, a blessing of wealth, power, and dominion. Jacob had stolen his brother's entire future. When Esau returned from the hunt and discovered the treachery, the tent was filled with his exceedingly great and bitter cry, the raw anguish of a man who had lost everything, echoed in the silence. The love for his brother curdled into a murderous hatred. "He has deceived me these 2 times," Esau raged. "He took my birthright, and now he's taken my blessing," he vowed. In his heart, "The days of mourning for my father are near. Then I will kill my brother Jacob." Rebekah's favoritism and Jacob's cunning had shattered the family. Now, the deceiver had to become a fugitive. The blessing he had stolen felt more like a curse, casting him out into the wilderness, away from his home, his family, and everything he had ever known. He was sent on a long journey to the distant land of Haran to find a wife from his mother's people. But everyone knew the real reason. He was running for his life. With nothing but a staff in his hand, Jacob fled, a lonely exile haunted by the ghost of the brother he had wronged. The future he had so cleverly secured was now a terrifying, unknown expanse. The journey was long and perilous, a time of profound isolation. One evening, using a stone for a pillow, the fugitive laid his head down to rest. And there, in the wilderness, in the midst of his fear and uncertainty, God met him. He dreamed of a great stairway resting on the earth with its top reaching to heaven, and the angels of God were ascending and descending on it. Above it stood the Lord, who spoke to him, not with condemnation, but with a promise. He confirmed the covenant of Abraham, promising Jacob the very land he was fleeing, countless descendants, and a divine presence that would never leave him. When Jacob awoke, he was filled with awe. "Surely the Lord is in this place," he said, "and I was not aware of it." This was the first sign that his life was part of a plan far greater than his own schemes. He eventually arrived in Haran, where he met his beautiful cousin Rachel at a well, and it was love at first sight. He agreed to work for her father, his Uncle Laban, for 7 years, to earn her hand in marriage. For 7 years he toiled, his love for Rachel making the time seem like only a few days. But on his wedding night, the great deceiver finally met his match. In the darkness of the tent, Laban switched his daughters, and Jacob woke up to find he had married Leah, Rachel's older sister. When he confronted Laban, his uncle simply replied, "It is not our custom here to give the younger daughter in marriage before the older one." Jacob had been paid back in his own coin, tricked into a loveless marriage through a deceitful charade. To marry Rachel, he had to work another 7 years. For 20 years he remained under Laban's roof, a man who changed his wages 10 times, learning firsthand the bitter taste of the medicine he had so freely given to others. Have you ever experienced a moment of karma, where you were treated the same way you treated someone else? Share your thoughts in the comments, because this is the turning point where Jacob begins to change. After 20 years of exile and servitude. After fathering 12 children who would become the heads of the 12 tribes, God finally spoke to Jacob again. "Go back to the land of your fathers and to your relatives, and I will be with you." The call was clear, but the path was terrifying. It meant returning to the land he had fled. It meant facing the brother whose future he had stolen. The fear of Esau, buried for 2 decades, rose up like a specter. Messengers returned with chilling news. Esau was coming to meet him, and with him were 400 men. Was this an honor guard or an army? Jacob's mind reeled with terror. He assumed the worst. The old Jacob, the self-reliant trickster, would have devised a clever plan. This was a new Jacob, a man humbled by years of hardship. He still used strategy, dividing his family and flocks into 2 groups, hoping one might escape. But then he did something remarkable. He prayed. It was a prayer of raw fear and sincere faith, acknowledging God's promise and his own unworthiness. "I am afraid of my brother Esau," he admitted, "for he may come and attack me." He had reached the end of his own cunning. He knew that no scheme could save him now. Only God could. The night before the dreaded reunion, Jacob made his final preparations. He sent his wives, his children, and all his possessions across the Jabbok River, a small tributary that snaked through the dark valley. He, however, remained behind, alone on the northern bank. Perhaps he needed to pray, to think, or simply to brace himself for what might be his final day on earth. And in that profound solitude, under a starless sky, a stranger appeared out of the darkness. The Bible describes him only as a man. What happened next was not a conversation, but a battle. The two figures engaged in a silent, brutal, all-night struggle. This was not a wrestling match for sport. It was a primal, desperate fight for dominance. They grappled in the dust, the silence of the night broken only by the sound of straining muscles and ragged breaths. All of Jacob's years of struggle with his brother, with his father-in-law, with himself were now distilled into this one physical confrontation. He was fighting for his life, for his future, against an opponent whose identity was a terrifying mystery. He fought with the same tenacity that had defined his entire existence, refusing to give up, refusing to be defeated. As the first hints of dawn began to break across the eastern sky, the mysterious man saw that he could not overpower Jacob. So, he reached out and struck Jacob's hip socket, dislocating it with a touch. A searing, white-hot pain shot through Jacob's body, crippling him. The fight was effectively over. His physical strength was broken. The stranger said, "Let me go, for it is daybreak." He could have easily escaped now, leaving the injured Jacob in the dust. But something had changed in Jacob. He had been physically defeated, but his spirit was unyielding. He clung to his opponent, his grip like iron despite the agony in his leg. This was the moment his life had been leading up to. He was no longer the cunning deceiver stealing a blessing in the dark. He was a broken man, clinging to a divine being in the light, demanding a blessing face to face. He gasped out the most important words of his life, "I will not let you go unless you bless me." He was sacrificing his pride, his body, everything, for one true moment of divine affirmation. The climax of the battle was not one of violence, but of revelation. The divine being asked him a simple question: "What is your name?" To answer was to confess everything. He wasn't a patriarch or a rich man or a master strategist. He was Jacob, the deceiver, the supplanter, the man who had spent his life running from that very identity. And in that moment of raw honesty, the blessing came. The being declared, "Your name will no longer be Jacob, but Israel, because you have struggled with God and with humans and have overcome." This was the victory. His name was changed. His identity was reforged. It's no longer the deceiver, but Israel, he who struggles with God. And then the tragedy that was interwoven with the triumph. As the sun rose over him, Jacob, now Israel, began to walk. And he was limping. His wound was permanent. He had seen the face of God and lived. But he would carry the scar of that encounter for the rest of his days, a constant physical reminder that his greatest strength was found in the moment he was broken. The sun was rising as the new man, Israel, limped toward his destiny. He looked up and saw Esau coming with his 400 men. The moment of truth had arrived. The old Jacob would have hidden in the back, but Israel, the man who had struggled with God, went on ahead. He bowed down to the ground 7 times as he approached his brother, and then the miracle happened. The feared confrontation dissolved into grace. Esau ran to meet Jacob and embraced him. He threw his arms around his neck and kissed him. They wept. The bitterness of 20 years was washed away in a moment of forgiveness. Esau looked not at a deceiver, but at a broken, humbled man, and his heart was moved. Jacob's all-night struggle with God had prepared him to finally find peace with his brother. The wrestling match had transformed him from the inside out, turning his fear into humility, and allowing him to receive the one thing his tricks could never secure: genuine reconciliation. His long exile was finally over. Jacob's story is one of the most complex and human sagas in the entire Bible. He was not a simple hero. He was a flawed, ambitious, and cunning man who used deceit to shape his own destiny. Yet it was through those very flaws that God led him on an epic journey of transformation. He fled his home as Jacob, the deceiver, and returned as Israel, a prince of God, a patriarch who had wrestled with the divine and survived. His permanent limp was a symbol of his new reality, a man who walked with a constant reminder of his weakness, and in doing so, relied on a strength that was not his own. His life proves that our greatest struggles, our deepest wounds, and our most profound moments of brokenness can become the very source of our most authentic blessings. What part of Jacob's story resonates with you the most? his cunning ambition, his lonely exile, or his transformative battle with the angel? Share your thoughts in the comments. If this epic story of struggle and redemption moved you, please subscribe to our channel for more journeys into the heart of the Bible. And if you think Jacob's family drama was intense, you need to watch the video on your screen about the tragic rivalry between King Saul and the young David.